with that, I will hand it over to Ben, who will guide us on saving seeds for the end of the season.
Howdy friends, how's it going? Like we mentioned at the beginning, if you would like to, you can unmute or turn on your cameras or whatever, since there's only just a handful of us here, so we can all kind of interact with each other. And if you have any questions throughout the presentation, I'm going to give you so much information in the 1 hour that we have together that you're going to want to ask questions as we go, most likely. So you can put them in the chat if you're more comfortable with that, or just go ahead and interrupt me and ask them, and we can discuss it as a group. So we're going to talk mostly about vegetable seeds, but we will cover some flowers and some herbs if you'd like. And I'm going to try to leave some time at the end for some Q&A. So we can have a little conversation. If there's anything that I didn't touch on that you're particularly interested in learning more about, hopefully we'll have time to cover that as well. So let me get to my slideshow here, and we'll, I guess I got to share my screen, right? Sorry. It's been a minute since I've done this. There we go. You guys can see that okay?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Groovy. All right. So a little bit about myself before we get started. I'm Bevin Cohen. I'm from Small House Farm, which is a sustainable homestead project in central Michigan. So right here in the middle of the mitten. We grow a number of herbs and those sorts of things here, but our main crop is seeds. We're seed farmers. We offer seeds via our website, smallhousefarm.com, and we also grow seeds for some commercial wholesale accounts. Our largest account is Baker Creek Heirloom Seed Company, so you might be familiar with those guys. And aside from that, we work with very small regional seed companies, a little more small scale. So that's kind of how we like things at Small House anyways. We're lucky enough, I live on a dead-end dirt road across the street from 1,100 acres of forest. So we do a lot of foraging out there for our food and our medicine. And it's really a blessing that that's how I get to spend my day at work. But let's talk about saving seeds. So this is the list. We're going to start with this. You can screenshot this, or you can come back and check out the recording at any point to get this information. But to get us started, we need to gather our equipment, right? And I tried to put together a list of this is stuff that you most likely already have. No need to really go purchase stuff to be a seed saver. All this stuff is pretty accessible, especially if you're already a gardener. You probably have a bunch of these things around your house. So we're going to kind of touch on these as we go throughout the presentation, things like harvest baskets and scoops and yarn and that sort of thing. Now, screens and drying racks, that's probably the most specialized piece of equipment here. And I've got some pictures of some coming up in the presentation so you can see them. They're very easily fabricated. You can make your own at home. You can purchase them from Seed Savers Exchange, or Southern Exposure Seed Exchange also offers them. A couple years ago, I was traveling to Wisconsin. I was going there to do a seed cleaning demonstration at a farm, and we're going to clean brassica seeds. Specifically broccoli seeds is what we're going to clean. Very tiny little broccoli seeds, right? And I'm already past Chicago, so I'm like well into this trip, and I realized that I hadn't brought my screens with me that I was going to use to sift these seeds clean. And so that was kind of a bummer, but in every challenge is an opportunity. And lo and behold, on the side of the road, as I was driving along, somebody had gotten new windows and had tossed up some old window screens on the side of the road. So I pulled over to pick them up. And I mean, the gauge on a window screen is exactly the size that you need to clean brassica seeds, right? The hole is large enough that the seed will fall through, but the gauge is small enough that all the chaff will stay above. So very perfect for cleaning brassica seeds. I brought those screens with me to this farm. That's what we used. Truth be told, I still use that same window screen to this day to clean my brassica seeds. So, I mean, we can be very resourceful and get our hands on all of these things, spending very little money at all. Tarps and paper plates, box fans, running water, all that sort of stuff. Here's your list, and I'm going to talk about each one of these things as we use them throughout the presentation. I also want to touch on this, when people think about seed saving our seeds in the fall, right? And that's when we're bringing the majority of our harvest. That's when we're actually processing, harvesting, extracting the majority of our seeds. So certainly fall is a seed saving time of year, but seed saving is a year-round activity. And to have a successful seed harvest in the fall, we want to be thinking about seeds all year long. In the spring, before spring, January, in the middle of winter, when you're sitting with your seed catalogs and you're just flipping through and just dreaming about things to come, we need to be thinking about seed saving. In the spring, when we're planting and beginning our planting, our spacing, all these things, we need to be thinking about seed saving. And I'll tell you why, right? First and foremost, it's spacing and timing. So many of the things that we eat in our gardens, we eat in an immature stage, right? Think about something like lettuce, right? We're just eating the leaves of that. We're pulling these plants way before they even get close to producing seeds. We're pulling them before they flower. When we leave our plants to produce seeds, they're sometimes going to take up significantly more space than they normally would in our gardens if we were just growing them for food. Now, small house, we're about 3.5 acres is our total property. That's the whole thing. So that's my house, that's the woods, that's every single bit of my property. And we grow a lot of our own food here, right? So I have limited growing space. So when something is done producing food, it's got to go. Something else is going in that spot. We're pushing crops through here as fast as we can. But as seed savers, some of these things got to be in that space a little bit longer. And I got a plan for that. Just think about that lettuce again, right? You eat a lettuce plant, it's going to be a head of lettuce. Maybe you got a romaine, something like this. It's about this big, give or take. Let that thing go to flower to produce some seeds. It's going to get 3-4 foot tall. It's going to take up tons of space, right? When I'm planting my garden now in the spring, I got to think about how much space this lettuce is going to take up as a seed crop. A little bit more than it's going to take up as simply a food crop. And I got to understand timing. This plant is going to be in my garden way longer than it would be if I was just growing it to eat. As soon as lettuce bolts, people tend to pull it, right? And they replace it with something else, hopefully. But if you're leaving it for seeds, it's going to be in your garden for twice as long. We also want to think about fruit maturity. So many things that we eat are immature. Right? This is a cucumber, is what we're looking at in this picture here. So on the left, you can see this is Boothby's blonde cucumber. Write that down. Boothby's blonde cucumber. It's the greatest cucumber I've ever grown. It's this beautiful little yellow thing, thin skin, delicious. These black spines. It's good fresh. It's good pickling. It's a winner all the way around. And on the left is how I'm going to want to eat it. But think about a cucumber. Those thin, translucent little seeds in there, that's not going to grow anything, right? I got to leave these cucumbers to mature. All the way to the right, that big, wonky, ugly thing, that's a mature cucumber. And you don't want to eat it. The skin's thick, it's bitter, it's miserable, it's got these hard seeds in it, right? Not good for eating, perfect for seed saving. I got to leave these cucumbers on the plant way longer than I normally would, so they're going to produce some seeds. I have to understand fruit maturity. Now, it's also important to know that a food crop, any plant, well, food crops is what we're talking about right now. Their specific purpose in their existence is not to feed us, right? It's to produce the next generation, to produce seeds, right? They're just tricking us. These fruits, these things that they're creating are just dispersal mechanisms to get us to take these fruits and disperse these seeds as we travel along. When we leave the plants to produce their seeds, they're going to put all their energy into seed production. Right? If you continually plant fresh, tiny, immature cucumbers, your plant will continue to produce more cucumbers. Same thing as the green beans that you guys are growing. You keep picking those beans, they keep putting out beans. But you leave those fruits to mature, it's going to put all of its energy into those seeds, and the production ratio is going to drop. So when we're planting our gardens and we're thinking about seed saving, we have to understand that we need to leave a couple of extra plants set aside to produce seed, and then the other plants that we want to eat. Right? Because once we let these things mature, they're going to stop producing new fruits. We'll get into more of that. I got some more specific examples as we go. All right, let's break down some words here. These are terms that people use when they talk about seeds, and we're going to talk about them very briefly just to go over their definitions, because I hear these words used all the time, but I hear them used incorrectly so often that I feel that we should probably touch on what they mean, right? The two most important, of course, are highlighted in green. The first being open pollinated. This is the most important thing when we're talking about seed saving, is open pollinated. The simple explanation here is when these plants are left to pollinate openly, as nature intends with the plants around them, they will produce seeds true to the maternal type. What does that mean? All right. I know what I'm going to be able to predict what these plants grow. I grow Amish paste tomatoes. It's an open pollinated variety. I save the seeds from my Amish paste tomatoes. I plant them next year. I can predict I get Amish paste tomatoes, right? It's going to be the same shape, size, flavor. I know what I'm going to get. You'll see on commercial seed packets labeled OP a lot of times for open pollinated plants. This is what we want. You got to be down with OPP, right? There's a whole song about it, and it's specifically about open pollinated plants for seed saving. Now, this is converse to hybrids. Now, a hybrid is when we take two plants of the same species, cross-pollinate them with each other to get that hybrid. That F1 is what it's called, that first generation. Now, there's a lot of hybrids in our food system, and we're not going to debate the pros and cons of them. There's certainly both pros and cons. Most of the stuff you're going to get at the grocery store is a hybridized vegetable. And we generally are hybridizing our vegetables specifically for storage capabilities, right? I want to be able to pick a melon on a farm in California or in Mexico, load it onto a truck, drive it across the country to Michigan, put it on the shelf at the grocery store and let it sit there for a week before somebody buys it and they still have an edible thing. We're not necessarily breeding our vegetables anymore for flavor or for nutritional value. That stuff kind of falls to the side for making money, I guess, right? But that's a whole nother conversation. The issue with hybrids when we're talking about seed saving, right? We got the 2, we got the F1, right? We take that F1, that hybrid, and we save the seeds from that, plant them again the next year. We get the F2, the second generation, right? Within that second generation is every potential genetic expression that could have come from the first initial cross. What does that mean? I can't predict what those seeds are going to produce. They could be like the maternal plant or the paternal plant or a long lost cousin. They could be better. They could be different. It's hard to say what they're going to be. And that can be frustrating, not knowing what your food is going to grow. If you're growing for food, if you're growing for market, you need some sort of reliable predictability, right? Here's an example. A lot of the sweet corn that we're going to get at the farmers markets and at the stores and stuff is a hybridized sweet corn, right? It's a super sweet. And, you know, if you've ever had an heirloom sweet corn, you know you pretty much got to pick that thing and run to the house and cook it because the sugars are going to start turning into starches almost immediately. These new hybrids have been designed to stay very sweet for a long period of time. Totally cool, right? But here's the kicker. If we save the seeds from one of these hybridized sweet corns, right, and plant them again the next year to get the F2, well, the gene that causes corn to be sweet is a recessive gene. So the likelihood that that F2 corn that we grow is going to be a sweet corn at all is about 20%. Not good odds, right? That could be pretty frustrating. So when we're new to seed saving, when we're growing for food for our family, we want to stick with open pollinated. Very important. Now, the next word on the list here is heirloom. An heirloom is a word, man, you see it all the time. People are throwing heirloom all along. It's a good marketing term. What does it mean when we're saving seeds? An heirloom is essentially a seed that has been saved and passed down for 50 years or more. 50 years is kind of like that benchmark. Once we hit that, then it's an heirloom. Does a seed need to be heirloom for us to save it? No. Open pollinated, right? That's the word that we're looking for. And there are new open pollinated varieties being released every year. There's a lot of breeding work happening around open pollinated varieties now. And we can get wonderful new vegetables and fruits and save their seeds, and they're going to be reliable producers. But man, heirlooms, if somebody's been saving a seed and passing it down for 50 years, gosh, man, maybe there's a reason we want to consider saving it too, you know? It could be just a sentimental or historical or whatever. It could be the most delicious bean I've ever had. Whatever it is, if people have been saving it for that long, we might want to consider saving it too. I've got a kashaw, a type of squash that is said to have been grown by George Washington himself. And that's a fun story, you know? We've been able to trace it back historically all the way back to Abraham Lincoln, right? Now, we weren't able to get all the way to George Washington, but Abraham Lincoln, man, that's pretty significant. It's a nice kashaw. It's a great squash. It's fun to grow. But the historical significance alone is the reason that I continue to grow and save that squash. You know what I mean? Sometimes those heirlooms are pretty cool. Organic and genetically modified, we don't have time to get into. By any means, we could have a whole presentation on that, right? But I will say this about organics. Just assuming, for the sake of what I'm going to say next, everybody here, all of us, we grow organically, right? Just humor me on that. And what I mean by organically is natural inputs as opposed to synthetic inputs, right? Things that are grown with synthetic inputs are known as conventional crops, right? So synthetic pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, all that sort of stuff, all right? And that's a whole thing. We won't get into that debate. But if you plan to grow organically in your gardens and you get these seeds that were grown conventionally with these synthetic inputs, these plants have adapted to this synthetic treatment, right? Plants quickly adapt to their environment to do the best they can to produce seeds for the next generation. And if they have adapted, grown accustomed to this synthetic treatments, and you take these conventional seeds home to your garden and grow them organically, not giving them these synthetic inputs that they've grown adapted to, they're not going to perform as well as you would like them to. That's just a fact, right? Now, over a couple of seasons of selection and seed saving, you can bring them back and make them sensible again. But if you're going to grow organically in your garden, starting with organically adapted seeds certainly seems like a good head start to me. I mean, the garden's always throwing us a curveball, right? So anytime we can kind of give ourselves a little bit of a shortcut, that's a good one to take. And I don't mean necessarily certified organic, right? I mean, if you were to buy seeds from me here at Small House Farm, everything I grow is organically grown. None of it's certified organic. I'm not really into giving the government all of my money for their little sticker. I'm not, you know, that's another debate. I don't even have money anyways. But if I did, that's not what I would be spending it on, you know? Getting to know your farmers. You like to go to the farmer's market and meet your farmers. It's the same thing as your seeds. Get to know your seed farmers, and you'll know that they're producing quality seeds that you feel good about bringing home and growing in your gardens too. Here's a couple more terms. We're going to start breaking our seeds down into categories so we understand exactly how we need to work with them, right, as seed savers. First, of course, is annual and biennial. If you're a gardener, you're probably familiar with what these terms mean. An annual is a plant that is going to grow its entire life cycle in the first year. It is going to flower, fruit, and produce seeds the very first year that it grows. Whereas a biennial needs to be overwintered, vernalized is what it's called. For that second year is when it'll trigger itself to then produce its life cycle. It'll flower, fruit, produce seeds that second year. We also need to understand how our plants are being pollinated. A number of our garden crops are self-pollinated, which is handy. What this means is that they have perfect flowers, hermaphrodites, if you will. They have male and female parts right on the same flower. Or we can use different lingo. We could say staminate and pistillate parts, or we could say pollen shedding and pollen receptive parts, whatever kind of lingo you're into using, right? All on that same flower. What's that?
Oh, so sorry.
Oh, you're good. You're cool. All on the same flower, right? And they're going to produce their seeds right in amongst themselves. But some plants that we work with have separate flowers, separate female and male, separate pollen shedding and pollen receptive flowers, right? And they need insects or wind to move that pollen from one flower to the next to cause pollination to happen to get our fruits. We need to understand how this is happening in our garden. So sometimes as seed savers, we need to get involved in the process, right? So knowing how our food is being made, not only is that good for your soul, but it's also crucial to the work of a seed saver because we got to get involved in the process somehow. I'll get more into that in a moment. Here's the list though, folks. Screenshot this, write this down, whatever you got to do. This is the easiest of the easy self-pollinating annuals. Again, self-pollinating, perfect flowers, hermaphrodites, if you will, pollen shedding and pollen receptive parts right on the same flower. And they're annuals. They will produce their seeds in the very first year that you grow them. Beans, peas, lettuce, eggplant, peppers, and tomatoes. I put the list from the absolute easiest down to still very easy, but there's like an extra step. It's very simple stuff. If you are not saving seeds from everything on this list, this is kind of the year to do it then, right? You could baby step it if you want and just pick one thing off of this list. Beans and peas, whatever, tomatoes, whatever you're comfortable with. We're going to go through every single one of these so you'll know how to do it. When this presentation's over, you're going to know everything you need to know to save everything off of this list, right? No excuses. We'll start with these guys. This is Fabaceae, is the plant family. Beans, peas, cowpeas, garbanzos, and soy. Now, you may not be growing cowpeas and garbanzos in your garden, but you certainly can. I've grown them all here. They may be not as common, but it's certainly a possible crop. Again, they're all in the same plant family. They all have similar flower structures. They all produce seeds in the same way. If you can save seeds from one thing on this list, you can save seeds from everything on this list. It's exactly the same, right? Now, these are what are known as dry seeds. We're going to break our seeds down into two more categories, defined by the environment that the seed is in when it is mature. Think about something like inside of a tomato or a melon. It's wet. That's a wet seed. Other than that, dry seed. So these are dry seeds. Now, what we want to do is just kind of let our seeds mature on the plant. So if you've grown beans, you'll know that after a while, you'll be able to see the seeds start to form inside the pod. You'll be able to see that shape in there. Then they'll start to turn yellow. The leaves will start to fall off the plant. The pods will get kind of leathery. Then they'll get brown. They'll get crispy. Aha, that's exactly how we want it. Now dig this. I did some number crunching for some soybean farmers down in Indiana, trying to convince these soybean farmers to save their seeds, which for a number of different reasons they don't. It's mostly contractual. We won't get into that necessarily, but I mean, soybean farmers, and they don't necessarily like it when you tell them this, but they're seed farmers. I mean, soybeans are seeds, right? And these guys have all the equipment that they need to grow, harvest, process, and store seeds, but they don't seem to do it. So I was trying to crunch some numbers because at the end of the day, everybody's running the business. We got to make it financially sensible, right? So dig this. Now this is with soybeans. And if you've ever grown soybeans, you know that a soybean will have 2 to 3 beans inside of a pot. That's it. If you grow other green beans, you know that they have significantly more, 6 to 8 to 10 to 12. So the math is going to scale up in our favor, certainly as green bean growers. But with soybeans, if you leave 5% of your soybeans to go to seed, 5% of your crop, that 5% would produce enough seed to reproduce 100% of what you're growing, right? I mean, we can scale that in any direction that we want. 100 acres, 100-foot row, 5 plants, whatever you got, right? You leave 5% of those beans to produce seed, and that will produce enough seeds to reproduce 100% of your crop. So man, eat your green beans. Have a great time with them. Do whatever you want with them. Pickle them. I like dilly beans. You can eat them fresh. Put them in your stir fries. I don't care. Love those beans. Leave 5% of your beans to go to seed, and you'll have enough seed to reproduce that whole garden again next year. It's so simple. There's no excuse not to do it. So that 5% you're going to leave to mature. They're going to yellow. They're going to get leathery. They're going to get brown, and that's when we want to pick them. Now, if there's going to be a moisture event, snow, rain, frost, who knows what's going to happen in Michigan, right? Before those seeds are ready, but they've already started to turn yellow, we don't want them to get wet, right? Because those beans will sprout inside of those pods. So you got to avoid that. When the pods are yellow or anything past that, yellow and beyond, and there's water coming, you can pull them, pick them right off the plant. You can pick them off the plant, that you can pull the whole plant. That's what we do. I'm dealing on a larger scale. I will just pull all the whole plants, roots and all, right out of the ground, and I'll hang them upside down from the rafters in my barn and just let them sit there. I'll put a fan on them. As long as they got a cool breeze blowing, they will sit and continue to dry down. I've pulled beans in October and left them hanging in the barn until February when I've had time to get around to them. They're fine. As long as it's cool, dark, and dry, they'll be waiting for it. If you're small scale though, man, just pull those pods, put them on some screens, put them out, let them continue to dry. Then we have to move on to the next steps here, threshing. So threshing is a fancy word. It essentially just means beating the heck out of these things, right? We're just trying to agitate the pods. We're trying to break those pods open so they release their seeds. And that could be as simple as sitting around shelling beans by hand. That's super fun. It's like kind of a Zen thing to do. Get your friends over, have a couple of beverages, shell some beans. They're all those colorful little seeds. They're like little Christmas presents. Super fun, right? If you got a little bit more than that, a larger scale operation, or your friends have decided to stop coming over and shelling beans with you because they're onto your tricks, you can just load them all into a bucket from our list of equipment and literally beat it with a stick. It's called a flail is the technical term. I use an old wooden baseball bat. Load all the buckets, load the beans into the bucket, beat them with a baseball bat. All we're doing is we're shattering those pods to release the seeds. You're not going to break the beans. They're rock hard. They're going to shatter right up. If you don't have a bucket for some reason, you can load all of your beans into a pillowcase and whack it like it's a piñata. It's good therapy. Bam, 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 beat that thing. It's going to bust all those shells up. No problem. You got even more than that you can't even fit in your pillowcase? Lay them out on a tarp and have a dance party. Dance on them. I was at a wild rice harvesting event, and they brought the rice in off the canoe. We toasted it, which makes the shells hard. Laid it out on tarps. We put moccasins on it. They played drums. We danced on them. But what we're doing here is we're just shattering those shells to release those seeds. There's a lot of different ways that we can do it. But once we're done, we're going to have a big old pile of shells and beans all mixed together, right? So we move on to step 2, which is winnow, which is using wind to remove the chaff. The chaff being the bits of debris and things, the undesirables is known as the chaff. And there's a few different ways that we can go about it. Remember now my brassica story at the beginning. We can use screens to sift them out when we're dealing with small seeds, and the seeds will fall through the screens and the chaff will be left behind. We're dealing with something larger like beans. We can do like what this lady's doing here in the picture. She's taking all of her chaff and beans and she's pouring them in the air, allowing the wind to blow the chaff away. The chaff is lighter than the seed. 100% of the time, no matter the scale of the dry seed that you're working with, the chaff is always lighter than the seed. It's almost as if that's how nature intends it. It is. She's smart. This is how seeds are dispersed, right? So the chaff is blown away and the seeds fall below. If you don't have wind blowing the day that you're working on this, or the wind won't cooperate, which is how it works for me, never blows in the right direction, there's always an issue with it. We replicate wind with a box fan. From your list of equipment earlier, put the box fan on a table. You can adjust the speed, pour your seeds in front of it. The chaff will blow away and the seeds will fall down below. Back in the day, pre-COVID, when I used to go to libraries in person, sometimes I would bring beans with me and winnow them in the library, which was always a kick to see the librarian's face when I blow bean dust all over the room. Good times, seed saving is fun stuff. Then we've got our nice clean pile of seeds and we're going to package them up and we're going to label. And I'm going to give you a bunch of examples for packaging and labeling at the end. And I'm also going to say the word labeling about 100 times between now and then, because it is so important that you label things. When I hang my beans in the rafters, I label that rafter, right? I label every step of the way. I write on my tomatoes what they are. Labeling is so important. You're not going to remember. Take it from me, man. Just learn from my mistakes. I like to think I'm cool and I'm going to remember in 20 minutes what I was talking about. It's not happening. I'm not going to remember what these things are. Label, label, label. Critical to success. Tomatoes all look different. You can identify different tomatoes maybe if you've been growing them for a while, but all the tomato seeds look exactly the same. Let's talk about lettuce. We talked about lettuce briefly already, but I'd like to touch on it again. Look at this lettuce flower. Oh my gosh, isn't it beautiful? It's like a little sunshine. Asteraceae is the plant family here, same as dandelions. And the way that the seeds are produced and dispersed is very similar to a dandelion. So we let our lettuce go. It gets too hot, it gets too dry. The peak summer, our lettuce is going to bolt. The leaves are going to get bitter. They're not going to be enjoyable to eat. And at this stage, most people pull them. They tend to pull the plants, get them out of the way. They're embarrassed their friends are going to see them or something. I'm not exactly sure. But if you leave these things to go, they're going to produce so many seeds. These beautiful little sunshines. For the beauty alone, let some of your lettuce go to seed. Just they're awesome looking plants. They're going to get this tall, covered in these little tiny yellow flowers, right? They're going to open up, little sunshine, and then they're going to close up. And then the next day they're going to open back up, and it's going to be like a little poof, right? Just like a dandelion does. This is a dispersal mechanism for the seed. The wind will blow the seeds all around your garden, and you'll have little surprise lettuces all over the place. Or you can be a little more controlled about it, and you can collect them. This is how easy it is, folks. Ready? When you see the poofs forming on your lettuce plants, you can get yourself a paper bag and pull the poof off, throw it in the paper bag, pull them off, throw them in there, write on the paper bag what it is, fold it up, put it in the closet. Done. That's all you got to do. Next spring, when you're ready, you pull that paper bag out, shake it, all the seeds will be in there, plant them. No big deal. If you're a little bit larger scale and you want to save a lot of lettuce seeds, when about 3/4 of those flower stalks have turned into poofs, cut that whole flower stalk off, flip it upside down into larger paper bags, close it up, write what it is on there, put it away. Spring comes, you shake that thing, all the seeds are going to fall to the bottom of that bag, throw the stalk in the compost, full of lettuce seeds. Now you're going to have a bunch of those little poofs in there too. And that's not going to hurt anything. It's dry organic material. It certainly won't hurt. But if you don't like the aesthetics of it or whatever, you want to keep it a little bit cleaner, it's so easy to clean your lettuce seed. Now, very, very tiny seeds like this can be difficult to winnow using a fan or something like that. But if you take all of your lettuce seeds, kind of rub them between your hands a little bit, put them into a shallow container, like a bowl or something like that, and just blow on them. A gentle little, and all the poofs will blow away. They'll get in your beard. It'll be hilarious. And then you'll have a bowl full of lettuce seed. I mean, hundreds, thousands of it. Let's do the math with me. Ready? You plant one lettuce seed and you get a lettuce plant, right? You let it flower. That one plant will produce between 30 to 40 flowers, and each flower will produce between 12 to 16 seeds. You do the math at home. We don't need to get into that, but that's a lot from one seed. So it doesn't take a lot of lettuce plants to produce enough seed for yourself, for your family, for your neighbors, for your seed library, whatever you're doing with them. You can easily produce a ton of lettuce seeds, very little effort. Next, solanums. Now we're going to talk about tomatoes, we're going to talk about eggplants. And I'm going to kind of jostle them up a little bit as we go. They're similar, but they're different. There's some overlap. There's some differences, right? Here, what we're looking at is a tomato flower. See that cone that we're looking at? That's the anther cone. This is the pollen shedding portion of the flower. And inside of that cone is the pistil, the pollen receptive portion of the flower. And the pollen will fall down into that cone, pollinate that flower. Easy stuff. Cross-pollination is very, very unlikely to happen. Sometimes when you're dealing with older tomatoes, you'll see the little pistil peeking out of there, promiscuous little pistil, and sometimes those will get cross-pollinated. So keeping an eye on those things is going to be helpful. I'll give you some tips to how to avoid that here in a minute. But for the most part, tomatoes are self-pollinating, not going to cross, not a big deal, easy to get true to type stuff. When the fruits are ripe, the seeds are ready. The plant will signal its ripeness by changing color from a green tomato to a red tomato, or all sorts of different colors. Because I mean, tomatoes nowadays, they come in all sorts of different shapes and sizes, just like people do. Once they change colors, that's how you know that they're ripe. The seeds are ready to go. So we actually eat tomatoes at a ripe stage. So we're going to collect our ripe tomatoes and we're going to cut them in half. Right? This is the trickiest part. And this is so easy. My kids do this at my house, so you guys can easily do this. You collect your tomatoes. You cut them at the equator, if you will, at a horizontal, not the stem end, not the blossom end, but across the center. Open it up, revealing all of the chambers within, right? And we're going to squeeze all those guts out into a jar and we're going to ferment them. Now, why are we doing this? So let's imagine that we're tomato seeds. You can close your eyes and help you visualize it. All right, we're tomato seeds. We're inside of a ripe tomato out in the garden. It's a warm summer day. The sun's beating down on us. It's so warm. It's nice and juicy inside of our tomato. So it's such a warm and moist environment. It's literally the environment that a seed needs to sprout, right? So to stop that from happening, the little jelly coating that's around the seeds inside of a tomato is filled with growth inhibitor chemicals, specifically put in there by Mother Nature to stop these seeds from sprouting. So we need to break that down, remove that coating from our seeds to ensure better germination for ourselves next year. So we're going to squeeze all the guts of our tomatoes into a jar, like you see in this picture. Add a little bit of water, set it up on a windowsill. Now I recommend covering it. All the fruit flies in town are going to come to your house when you do this. It's going to get a little stinky. So cover it up. Cheesecloth is really good. I use saran wrap sometimes. If you use saran wrap, poke some holes in it though, because as it ferments, it's going to release gas. You want that gas to get out. Label the jar, set it up there. About 3 to 4 days. And it varies based on the type of tomato, the sugar content of the variety, you know, the humidity in your room, whatever it might be. But 3 to 4 days on average. And you'll know that they're ready. As you can see in this picture here below, see that white scum at the top of the jar there? That's what I call the funk. And when you see the funk, that's how you know you're in business. That's properly moldy. When you get to that stage, you get that good mold in there. You're going to add a little bit more water to it. Slosh it around. And then you can watch it within seconds. It'll completely separate out. It's pretty cool. I like to do this with kids and stuff because kids get a kick out of this. I get a kick out of this. It spreads right out like this, you know, and to the top of the jar. The funk goes back up to the top. All the immature seeds, all the growth inhibitor chemicals, any diseases that might have been in there, any bits of tomato, all the stuff you do not want flows. And to the bottom of the jar settles all of the good, healthy, viable tomato seeds. They separate right out. So you dump the junk off the top that you don't want. You pour the good stuff that you like onto a little screen. I got a colander. My wife keeps telling me it's for like pasta or something, and for sure it's for tomato seeds. You put it on there, you rinse it off real nice, get it clean, set it out to dry. I like to use paper plates. I think paper plates are perfect. Seeds don't stick too bad to the paper plates. But what's cool about it is I can label the plate. I can write right on the paper plate what the type of tomato is. When I'm done with it, I can scribble that out and write something else on there. I've got some paper plates I've used for like 4 years, same plates. Some people use them to eat a sandwich. They throw it away. I don't know what to do. These paper plates are pretty useful. They're reusable. You can use them for many, many years. When your seeds are dry, wait. Because although the seeds appear dry or even feel dry, they're not all the way dry inside, right? We got to let our seeds dry all the way through before we package them. We're talking 7 to 10 days. When you think your seeds are dry, wait 2 more days. If we package up our seeds before they're all the way dry, they're going to mold. Put the seeds in the freezer or something like that, and there's still water inside, that water is going to expand. It's going to crack the embryo, ruin all the seeds. I mean, at this point in the game, we've put so much effort into these tomato seeds. We've grown these tomatoes, we've harvested them, we've fermented them, we've done all these things. We don't want to wreck it at the last step, right? So chill. You got to be like Mother Nature. Mother Nature takes her time, and all things works out in the end, right? Just relax. Give your seeds plenty of time to dry. And then package them up, and you label. You label. You label. Let's talk about eggplants. There's a bunch of things to say about eggplants. Now, first is we eat eggplants before they're ripe, right? This purple eggplant that you eat here is an immature fruit. You're not going to get very many good seeds out of that. So you got to let some eggplants mature. And they'll get brownish, yellow, wonky, bitter, blah, terrible, but they're full of good seeds, right? So we got to leave some of these fruits to mature. Now, another thing that's interesting about eggplants, they are self-pollinating, certainly, but imagine an eggplant flower. If you've ever seen one, big, beautiful, gorgeous things, and insects are going to get all up in them and bring pollen from the wrong sides of the track and cross-pollinate all of our stuff. And we can't have that happen if we want pure, true to type seeds. So here's some workarounds to get pure, true to type eggplant seed. 1, just grow one type of eggplant. Easy. You grow one type of eggplant, you don't have to worry about it. Now, what if you're growing in a community garden? You can't tell everybody else what to grow, right? Or what if you just have a desire to have so much diversity, right? I want a purple one, and I want a stripy one, and I want all these things. Dig it. So this is Solanum melangina, which is an eggplant species originally from Asia, is where they were domesticated. That's where eggplants come from. Now, in Africa, they also domesticated an eggplant, Solanum aethiopicum, and we eat them when they're green, and they turn orange when they ripen. Pretty cool stuff. It's actually my favorite. I prefer them over the purples. We grow them here at Small House all the time. Not only are they fun and delicious, but I can grow a purple eggplant, melangina, and an orange eggplant, aethiopicum, right next to each other. Remember at the very beginning when we were talking about hybridization, 2 plants of the same species cross-pollinating to give us that F1 hybrid. Do you remember that? 2 plants of the same species. That's the key, same species. These eggplants are different species. Interspecies cross-pollination is very rare. So I can grow my purple eggplant and my orange eggplant right next to each other. No problem. Now, what if I want to grow a bunch of eggplants of the same species? Now, that could be tricky. And in about 2 slides, I'm going to give you the answer to that. But before we move on to that, I want to give you the trick for how to harvest eggplant seeds the easiest. Now, think about an eggplant. You know how all the seeds are dispersed throughout the whole fruit. They're all intermingled in there. And imagine trying to pick them all out one at a time. What a pain, right? So here's the trick, folks. Get yourself a food processor, right? And you want the plastic dough blade, right? That comes with the food processor. That's the key here, is the plastic dough blade. Get your food processor, plastic blade. Take your ripe eggplant, press them up into small cubes. Throw it in the food processor, add about a half a cup of water to it, put on the lid, just a couple of buzzes. The agitation from that plastic blade, knocking all that fruit around in that water, all the seeds are going to fall right out. So then you can either scoop the bits of fruit out by hand, or you can use your screen, pour it into the screen so the seeds fall through the screen, but the fruit is left above, and you'll have hundreds of eggplant seeds, very little effort at all, in absolutely no time. That's the trick. Let's talk about peppers real quick. Now, the key with peppers is understanding that you have to wait till they're ripe. I had a guy the other day, he said to me, he's like, oh, I had this great green pepper. I saved the seeds from it, then they wouldn't grow. What's the deal, Ben? Green peppers are just unripe red peppers. When you go to the grocery store and they got green peppers and red peppers, but green pepper is always cheaper because it's not ripe. It's a lot easier to grow those. We got to let our peppers ripen, right? And they'll signify their ripeness by changing colors. Easy stuff, right? So the other trick is if you're harvesting hot peppers, capsaicin is the chemical that makes a pepper spicy. And you'll find it on the inside of the pepper around the membrane, which is that white stuff that encases the seeds. It's essentially like the uterus of the plant, encasing all of those seeds. It's filled with this oily substance called capsaicin, which is very spicy. And if you get that on your fingers and you touch yourself in any sensitive areas, like your eyes or your nose or more sensitive areas, it's going to be a sad scenario. And it's going to be a sad scenario for quite some time. So wear gloves when you're dealing with harvesting hot pepper seeds. And I'm telling you from experience. If you forget that and you get some hot stuff in a place that you don't want it, it's oil. So it's not water soluble. That's why like drinking water doesn't help when you eat spicy food. You need something fat soluble. So put some milk on it, some butter, whatever, yogurt, whatever you got around. Put that in the area where you're sad, and that will help get that away. It's also important to note that peppers will cross-pollinate with each other, being open, beautiful flowers, although they're self-pollinating plants. And remember that sweet corn that we talked about again at the beginning and how sweet is a recessive gene? If you grow a sweet pepper and you grow a hot pepper and they cross-pollinate, all you'll have is hot peppers, right? So we have to have some workarounds. And this applies to the eggplant scenario that I discussed moments ago, bagging our blossoms. This is the key. This way we can grow a bunch of plants of the same species and not even have to worry about it. You get these little organza bags. You can get them at dollar stores, wedding supply places, Seed Savers Exchange will sell them to you. And what you're doing is you're creating a physical barrier around these flowers. Look at the flower on the right here. I put an organza bag around this flower, stopping insects from bringing pollen in that I don't want. It's a self-pollinating flower, and it will produce a fruit right inside of that bag. And once I see the fruit start to grow, I know that it is safe. I can take that bag off, mark that part of the plant with a big colorful ribbon, yarn, something like that. It's on your list of equipment. Don't use a little white piece of thread. You'll never find it again. Something really easy to find. And you know that those fruits have true to type pure seeds. On the left, you'll see what's known as a lettuce bag. Seed Savers Exchange sell these as well. It's to stop the lettuce seeds from blowing away. I've got it over top of a pepper plant. So I know that all of those peppers on that plant are going to be pure, true to type seeds. If you don't want to buy it from Seed Savers Exchange, you can go to like Home Depot or Lowe's or one of those hardware places, and it's a paint strainer bag that they use to strain paint. Same thing. All right. Does anybody have any questions at this point before I get on to the next wave of information? Anybody, anything? Don't be shy. Moving right along. Now we're going to talk about insect and wind pollinated annuals. So this is kind of like your phase 2. These are the more difficult plants, although still relatively easy, but they do involve a little bit more knowledge and care to get good true to type seeds. But I'm going to give you some shortcuts and workarounds to make sure that we can succeed with all of this. Melons and squash is where I'm going to focus most of my energy. Spinach and corn, being wind pollinated, are a little bit. So let's talk about melons and squash first, okay? So first off, let's talk about this. This is the family Cucurbitaceae. This is the squash family. Now you can see Cucurbita, that's your squash, right? So C. pepo is your zucchinis, your patty pans, your crooknecks, your acorn squashes. All of your summer squashes fall into that species, Cucurbita pepo. Then you've got your C. maximas, which is your Hubbard squashes, your big banana squashes, your Gethyacosamins. A lot of your big winter storage squashes are of the species C. maxima. Then we can say C. moschata. Now we've got like our butternuts and our Seminole pumpkins and those types of squash. The reason I mentioned this, remember, interspecies cross-pollination is very rare. So I know that I can grow a zucchini, C. pepper, a Hubbard squash, maxima, and a butternut, moschata, right next to each other in the same garden. They're not going to cross-pollinate. I can enjoy all that diversity in my garden and at my dinner table, and tons of pure seeds to share with all of my friends. Pretty cool, right? Let's keep going. Cucumis sativus is my cucumbers. Cucumis malo is my melons, like my cantaloupes and my honeydews and things. Citrellus lanatus on the next line, that's my watermelons. And langonarias, those are your decorative gourds that you see in the wintertime, birdhouse gourds, that sort of thing. From the top, I can grow zucchini, Hubbard, butternut, cucumber, honeydew, watermelon, birdhouse gourd. 7 things in a pile in my garden, no worries. Tons of diversity, tons of pure seed, no effort at all. Pretty cool, right? Understanding the species of the plants that we grow in the spring is going to help us be much more successful in our seed saving in the fall, right? That's why seed saving is a year-round activity. Here's another picture. This is the 3 main squash that we're going to deal with. There's my butternut, there's my Hubbard type, and see my acorn squash up front. What do you notice about my acorn squash? It's orange, not green, right? Because it's ripe. We got to leave these fruits to ripen, again, just like we talked about with our cucumbers. We got to make sure that these plants are ripe when we harvest them for seeds. Sometimes what we eat is not the same thing as what we want for seeds. And understanding that as we get into it is going to be, it's going to make it a lot easier for us, cut down on some frustrations, right? Now, melons, on the other hand, when they are ready to eat, they are mature and the seeds are ready. And we're kind of already doing this. Think about, let's walk through eating a melon together, right? You pick out the nice melon, you smell it at the store, it smells good, it's ripe, you bring it home, you cut it in half, you scoop out the seeds. Those are literally the first steps to eating a melon. Cut it in half, you scoop out the seeds. Now, you're taking those seeds and putting them in the compost or in the garbage, hopefully not, I don't know what you're doing with them. But what if instead you rinse them off in your screen and put them out on a labeled paper plate to dry? Boom, seed saver, right? I mean, that's how easy it is. We don't think about this necessarily. People are so removed from their food that thinking about seeds is just yet another step away from what's happening. But we're literally doing the mechanics of seed saving almost every time we prepare a meal. You cut open a pepper, you take out the seeds. That's step number 2 of cutting a pepper. It's the same thing that we're doing with the melon. We're literally already doing these things. We're just not thinking about it. So maybe if we tweak the way that we think just a little bit about this thing, when you do that, you'll notice you tweak the way that you think about a lot of things. But just the slightest change in our perception, look at the impact that we could have, right? We're already doing it. Cucumbers we talked about, right? Now, when we're making a salad, we're not getting any seeds out of those. We got to leave those guys to mature so we can get some good seeds out of them. Now, cucumbers I'll also ferment. We'll talk about that in a second, too. We'll kind of revisit that fermentation thing. Watermelons. You've all been saving watermelon seeds your whole life. You eat a watermelon, you get a seed in your mouth, you spit it out, right? Spit it into a bucket. Now you're a seed saver, right? It's that easy. I'm kind of oversimplifying it, but I'm really not. It's that easy. You're going to want to wash those seeds, get the sugars off of them before you put them out to dry, but you're already extracting the seeds from the watermelon every time you eat a watermelon. You need to think about it as a seed saver. Look at all those seeds that are right there. Random side note, watermelon seeds are totally edible, just like pumpkin seeds. If you want to, roast them up and eat them. They're delicious. It's a funny thing. We waste so much food. When I was a little boy, my grandma told me that if I ate watermelon seeds, that a watermelon plant would grow in my belly. Like pretty much scarred me. I was frightened. So, but no, they're actually edible. Isn't that funny? We waste so much food. We don't even realize how much food we just throw away. It's crazy. I'm not even going to get into that. But those are all wet seeds that we talked about, right? So we extract them. They're all in these moist environments. We extract them. We wash them to get all the sugars off of them. We put them out to dry. I say ferment if needed here, and we're going to think about the seeds that I ferment. Tomatoes we talked about. Cucumbers I mentioned. Think they got that similar gelatinous coating around the seed. We want to get that off of there. We're going to want to ferment that. Sometimes I'll ferment things like tomatillos, ground cherries, things like that, but not so much because of growth inhibitor chemicals, but to kind of just break down some of that plant material. We do it with squash as well. You know, when you're getting the seeds out of a squash, It's all that stringy stuff inside of there. It's hard to get off. It's hard to clean. Kind of can be a pain. Just throw that all in some water and let it sit. That plant material break down a little bit. That stringy stuff will release the seeds a little bit better. Make it a little bit easier for you to clean them out. You can also add them to water. This is kind of a shortcut trick. This works well with these wet seeds, squashes. Now think about this. You take your seeds out of your squash, you put them in a jar, add a little bit of water. Some of them are going to sink. Some of them are going to float. The seeds that float, ditch them. They're not mature. When a seed hasn't fully developed yet, the embryo hasn't quite grown all the way, there's going to be little air pockets inside of that seed, which is going to cause them to float. We don't have time for that. So you put them in there. Those floaters, man, ditch them. All the seeds that sink, put them out on somewhere to dry on a well-labeled paper plate or something, and let them dry before you package them up. Simple, simple stuff. It's a little shortcut like that in the fall is going to help us later in the spring. See, it's very cyclical. All right, let's talk about brassicas real quick. Let's see how much time I got here. Oh, I got a little bit of time. Okay, so we won't get too much into brassicas just on the fact that they can be a little bit more difficult. A lot of them are biennials. They need to be overwintered. Some do not, though. Broccoli, obviously, if you've let your broccoli go, you've seen it flower already. Bok choy, smooth German kale. There's certainly a few that are annuals that will produce seeds in the first year. You can see the seed pods here in the picture. These are called siliques, is what they're called. They're real groovy. The dispersal mechanism now here for the silique is when it gets dry, it's going to shatter. Throw those seeds all over the place. That's what's going to happen here. And unless you just want your kale seeds just planted in a big bunch in one spot, which you might be into that, but if you don't want that, you're going to have to pay attention and harvest these things. When about 3/4 of your siliques are yellow, not brown. Brown or crispy is too late, and when you touch it, they're just going to open up and drop these seeds. Yellow. Cut those stems right off, put them in your bucket, set them somewhere dry, let them finish drying. Then you literally just take those stalks, bang them on the side of the bucket, all the seeds are going to fall out. And then we sift them in our screen. We've already talked about it, right? Biennials, that like I talked about, we're not going to get into that process so much. Maybe we'll get together again next year once you've mastered the art of the self-pollinating annuals, and we can talk about these guys, right? But this is the coolest thing about brassicas. Dig this, man. So we got cabbage, Brussels sprouts, kohlrabi, kale, broccoli, cauliflower. Collard greens should be on this list. I don't know why everybody wants to ignore collard greens. They're actually one of my favorites. At the grocery store, we see them all in their own little boxes with their own little labels and their own little prices and all this sort of stuff. In reality, they're all the same plant. They're all the exact same thing. They're all Brassica oleracea. They all came from the same wild mustard, right? Now, it's over a period of time, we'll say 1,000 years or more. Different people in different places prefer different things about these plants. Some people like the flower bud. Some people like the leaf. Some people like the stem, whatever it may have been. And when they selected their seeds, they selected for these particular traits. And they continue to get those traits year after year. Fast forward 1,000 years, and we have what we now consider this many different vegetables. But they're the same. This is the power of seed saving. This is what you do every year in your gardens when you select the traits, right, that you enjoy, whether it's early peppers, juicy melons, big fat tomatoes, whatever you're into, you choose these particular traits. Those are the plants you save the seeds from. And those seeds will give you those same traits again the next year, right? Disease resistance, early production, uniform production, whatever it is that you like, it doesn't even matter. You select for that, and that's what you're going to get. That's the beauty of seed saving. Every time we save and share our seeds, it's this significant. If I was to give each one of you seeds to an Amish paste tomato and send you off onto your life, and we all gathered together again 10 years from now and brought our seeds with us, we would all have noticeably different tomatoes. We all started with the same seeds, but we all selected for different traits that grew in different environments with different growing techniques. And we all get different things. That's the beauty of it, man. That's pretty cool stuff. And in today's world, right now, which is very uncertain, having that kind of food security is one of the most important things that we can do. Now let's talk about storing our seeds. We put a lot of work into saving these things, right? So we've got to make sure that we store them right. Airtight containers are very important. Keeping them in a cool, dark place is the most important thing. You can put them in a jar. These little vials in this picture are just for show. We use a lot of mason jars here at Small House. We do a lot of seeds, right? And close them up real tight. Sometimes I'll put a silica packet in there to wick moisture away if I'm feeling real fancy. But keeping them cool, dark, and dry is the most important things. If you're just saving seeds from this fall to plant again next spring, an envelope's coming. Put them in an envelope in a box. If you go to your local seed library, you'll see that your seeds are going to come in a little coin envelope, and that's totally cool as long as they are cool, dark, and dry in a nice, stable place. put them in a closet, put them in the cupboard, put them down in the basement, put them in a box or a barrel or a bin or a basket. All of that is fine as long as it's a low regulated temperature. The cooler, the better. Below 45 degrees is super awesome. You don't want a lot of fluctuating temperatures. And dry. Keep them dry. Here's a label. Now, we've talked about labeling a bit. This is probably the most important part of the whole thing right at the end here, right? This is what Seed Savers Exchange recommends for the information that you want to put on your label. I always say defer to your local seed library, whatever they want you to do. But this stuff is important, right? The variety name, the common name, the scientific name, Latin binomial, right? That's important, right? Let's go back to thinking about our cucurbitaceae, right? Our pepos and maximos. Remember we talked about that? And that cucurbita pepo includes things like your zucchinis and your summer squashes, but also like your acorn squash and your sugar pie pumpkins, right? So if I grow a zucchini and a sugar pie pumpkin, they're both the same species and they cross-pollinate with each other, next year I'll get pumpkinis. And that's not good. And nobody wants pumpkins, right? So understanding the Latin binomials of my plants now, and when I share them, when I save them, when I disperse them to my friends, right, is going to help them have great planning for their seed saving adventures as well. So that's very, very important. As much information as you can put on a label, not only for yourself, like I said, so you can remember what's happening, but for everyone that you share it with, so they have all the tools that they need to succeed with seed saving. Here's a shameless plug for my book. If you're into that, my book, Saving Our Seeds, will walk you through how to harvest seeds from 43 different species of crops. Every detail that you need to know about everything seed saving related. There's a couple of books as well on the side. There's a coupon code at the bottom, but I'm not even going to mention it yet because it's on the next slide too. This is my newest book, The Artisan Herbalist, which has nothing to do with the topic of the day, but it's my new book, so I just wanted to share it with all of you. If you want to learn about growing and foraging herbs and how to create them into teas, tinctures, oils, and other medicinals for your family, this book will teach you how to do it. There's that coupon code again. You can use it, SEED, for 15% off everything at smallhousefarm.com. That's my website. Here's all the social media things. You visit that YouTube, man, you can watch me do all the things I talked about today. If you're more of a visual learner, that works out well too. But that's all I got to say.